Welcome to the Barna Resilient Pastor Podcast, where we help pastors lead with wisdom, hope, and courage in a changing world. I'm Rich Villodas, and this podcast is part of Barna's mission to encourage and equip pastors to be resilient, spiritually, emotionally, and in their leadership. And together, we'll explore new research and real conversations to help you understand the times and to know what to do. If you're not already doing so, go to barna.com to sign up for the free Barna email to access the latest articles, resources, and special discount offers. All right, everyone. Today, we're joined by a special guest, David Kinnaman. David, the CEO of Barna. David, do you go by DK? I saw Glenn call you DK. Is that something that happens, or is that elementary school?
That happened. It's happened, and I have no idea why.
So no one's ever called you DK.
No, people do call me DK. Yeah. Yes.
Okay. Do you like it? That's the question.
I guess it just rolls off the back. I have no idea. I haven't even noticed it anymore. So I must like it enough to let it go.
All right.
I think he likes it best when we call him boss. You know,
that's right. That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Well, listen, David, so good to have you, and Glenn, Sharon, so good to see you guys. Welcome to the new year.
Here we are.
Good to be with you guys.
Here we are indeed. Hey, listen to this. I want to throw this out to you. I am part of a potluck and contributing a meal. And recently I made this amazing Puerto Rican dish. I just want to know if you guys are throwing down like I am. I made like arroz con gandules, which is like yellow rice and pigeon peas. It's exceptional. What do you guys bring into the potluck? And what I mean by that is not like what you're ordering. What do you bring in if you're making a meal?
Yeah.
That's a tough one for me. I don't cook very much.
I mean, first of all, I have to say, I saw you post about this, Rich, and
thoughts. Come on,
how pleased you were with you were so pleased with yourself that you brought out your like deep preacher voice.
Yeah, the Pentecostal voice came out.
Yeah, I did. So
okay. Well, Sharon, don't get around the question. What are you bringing, Sharon? I want to know.
I'm a dessert girl. So if I'm gonna be rolling up with something, I'm going to be baking. And I have to give a shout out to my husband, Ike, because he really, he loves to make brownies, and his brownies are so noteworthy that at one point our small group trademarked them. They were called Brownies by Ike Miller. And so that's kind of like his thing, his brownies.
Brownies by Ike. That, there could be a future in that business for Ike if this church.
So if y'all ever come visit, we'll make you some brownies by Ike.
BBI.
You know what? I got two options for you, Rich. Okay,
let's hear it.
One is a reverse sear tried tip that I would slow cook on the Traeger for a couple hours, Santa Maria style. Or there's a nice chipotle marinade. I buy pre-marinated, so I'm cheating a little bit. I'll reverse sear it, slow cook it for 2 hours on like 225.
Yes.
And then at the very end, get the gas grill going. So the low cooks on the smoker. Then get the gas grill up to like 500. Throw it on there for 5 minutes. Each side sears the outside. Boom. Let it sit.
Well, I want to know, are you reading this, Glenn? Or
no, this is my go-to meal. This is from the heart. People over. No, this is my go-to meal. The other option is less proven, but I've done it a few times, and the family likes it enough that we might try it with guests. And that is a red curry chicken, a Thai red curry. I think I can do a pretty good.
Wow, is that really spicy?
You can control it depending on how much of the chili paste you put in there.
Wow. Okay. Well, we have a good meal right there. And David's bringing reservations. That's what David is doing, from what I hear. Well, listen, everyone, we have a great conversation today. And before we get into our conversation, we want to thank one of our partners, World Vision. Together in partnership with Daniel Strickland, 10 by 10, and the Barna team, they've created a free resource to help equip pastors, parents, and leaders as you guide the spiritual lives of the kids and teens in your care. Download Parenting the Open Generation at worldvision.org/resilient26. Well, as we think about the new year, one of the key things many of us are focusing on is our key relationships around us. And so, David, I know you and the Barna team have recently come out with some new data on this topic. What's been surprising you from what you're seeing in this data?
Well, it's so good to be with you guys. Thanks for the invitation into the podcast today and to join you talking about some of the data we've been discovering. We've got this brand new study called "The Relationships of Today's Pastors," and it's been a real joy to work alongside some partners to understand what's happening in the lives of pastors. So, for just a minute or two, I'll just unpack some of the key findings, and then we're going to have a roundtable discussion with the gang here about what this might mean. First of all, I grew up as a pastor's kid, so this is not just an academic experience. It's personal for me. I know some of the great things my parents did, some of the things that were challenging. I'm still in ministry, and I absolutely love them. They're my heroes. So Gary and Marilyn Kinnaman. So there was a lot of what has driven me in this ministry is just to pay it back to leaders, to help them know how God can orient them at the center of their ministry, which is in and to their family. So this study is great. We're looking now at senior pastors, their relationships, and the headline is that out of all these different areas of flourishing, relationships actually are the lowest rated for pastors. It's lower than these other aspects of their flourishing, and it's even rated lower than other churchgoers. So we know that they're at least admitting to us, pastors are telling us that they have some challenges when it comes to their relationships. So that's just the headline. They're at least honest enough to tell us that. Then we could kind of round out and look at a couple of other things. We find, for example, that only half of pastors tell us they get any kind of resources from spiritual direction, counseling, therapy. Maybe this is why they're struggling in terms of their relationships. They are not turning to the same resources that they might recommend to others. So that's on sort of the downside. One of the upsides is that we find that 3 out of 4 pastors say that they are married to their best friend. And another 19% say that is somewhat true. So 76% of pastors say it's very true they're married to their best friend, and 19% say that's somewhat true. So that's, I think, a really cool thing that when pastors are in a spousal relationship, they tend to feel very connected emotionally with that person. And then finally, the other kind of key highlight here was just the homogeneity of pastors today. So 9 in 10 pastors have a spouse. Again, I think that's a positive. And 90% have children either in the home or they're already grown. But what that tells us is that I believe pastors can sometimes struggle to understand and communicate to people that don't have that same experience, maybe who never had the chance to have children or never wanted to have children or weren't able to have children. I don't know that they understand the experience of people that have not been married. I'm a widower now, and so like 5 years single. And so the vast majority of pastors are men, are married, and have had or do have children at home. Even when they get divorced, they often get remarried relatively quickly and at higher rates than the national average. So there's some areas of strength, some interesting things about the spousal strength of pastors, some of their honesty in telling us that their relationships aren't maybe where they need to be, but also some opportunities for real growth and opportunities for looking forward when it comes to the health and vitality of pastors today. So we're here to have this conversation. Again, I wanted to say before we dive in to Glenn and to Rich and to Sharon, thank you so much for being a part of the Resilient Pastor Initiative this last number of years. We love you guys here at Barna. We're so grateful to you on behalf of Joe Jensen and Lauren Peterson and Nancy Grace Brown and all the others here at Barna and who've come before and who are coming down the track. We love you guys. Thank you for being a part of this. So let's go to you, Glenn. What do you do? What's your reaction to some of those findings? How do those numbers, those percentages hit you?
Well, David, just again to return serve here. I mean, thanks for trusting us with this, with stewarding this. I mean, it's no small thing, and just to be able to partner with you and just join in, long history here of good and important work that you guys are doing and have done. To start with the last one you mentioned, the kind of the sketch of a pastor being, 90% of them are married, they're men, they have kids. there can be something really positive about the stability of that, perhaps, and maybe in some sense could represent something aspirational to some group of people. But there's a significant, I think society is changing. In our church, we did Barna's survey tool, the Church Pulse Weekly. We did that a couple years ago. We discovered that more than half our church is single. Almost 60% of our church is single, and they're single for a number of reasons. Some of them are, divorced. Some of them, widow or widower. Some of them never been married. So like you named it, David. There's so many. The profile of the people who are in church is changing. And I don't know if pastors are becoming aware of this. I think the trap can be that you spend your time around people who are in the similar kind of social sketch, as you. And so you really have to work intentionally to, I'm going to hang out with people from different demographics, maybe different marital statuses, and to be around people like that. It's the only way to shape your imagination. Sharon, how is this in your context,
Well, one question that actually the data raised for me, David, especially that the first statistic you shared about how pastors relationally, just generally, are weaker than the average person. And yet there's also this data point about pastors saying that by and large, their spouse is their best friend. And so the state of marriages is strong, but the state of relationships, maybe outside marriages, is weaker. And I'm so fascinated by that because it makes me wonder, and I'm curious for all of you guys, especially if there's like a gender difference here. But even in my own marriage, I know for me, having many relationships is like a huge priority for me. And we talk all the time about having that like constellation. But I know for Ike, he is much more inclined to sort of, I'm like his anchor relationship, I would say. Like I'm the safe person. I'm the one that he is going to go to with almost everything. And I'm curious if that is a gender difference or if that is the dynamic that is reflected here, where you have the marriage is strong because the spouse is serving as that primary relationship tie. Does that resonate with you guys at all?
Yeah, I think just to answer on behalf of the research, there are certain things we could say for sure, and a lot of things that the research is unclear about just because of the nature of survey research. But in particular, when we asked about flourishing, we've been partnering with a couple different groups, GLUE and the Harvard Program for Human Flourishing, on kind of key questions that ask about flourishing. So when it comes to relationships or emotional, mental well-being, finances, vocation, faith, spiritual well-being, the relationships have a couple of questions that we ask that are kind of more generally, how well are you doing when it comes to feeling secure in your relationships? They're not asking specifically about marriage or other specific parts or parenting. So it's just interesting that pastors, their average score, their index score was 67 compared to all U.S. adults at 79. And practicing Christians were at 85. So it's the one area where pastors definitely rate themselves lower than other segments. And then they can also tell us things like their spouse is their best friend. So, we talk about this a lot at our company. Two things can be true at once. A person could have a great best friend marriage and also still rate themselves low on the relational flourishing score. That can also tell us that they're just being honest. And sometimes that in itself is a good outcome. There's a whole science behind presenting a certain version of ourselves. And we've seen this, for example, in spiritual maturity research, that as people become more mature, they often rate themselves lower than when they're less mature. So it's an inverse relationship, even in how you would report, whether a person is growing in spiritual maturity. So I think there's a lot of things that are going on here. And I certainly think there's some personal dynamics, people that are extroverted or introverted, or might have, as you say, kind of this primary relationship with the spouse. Where can we foster those relationships of safety? And that's really what the data is telling us, that a lot of pastors do not have those friendships outside of their spouse, or even in a professional setting outside of their church. So you've got to find those places where you can be truly safe to talk about the things that you're struggling with.
That is, I think you're putting your finger on something there, David. Sharon, when you said the gender thing, it made me think of something that Arthur Brooks said. David, you recommended me this book, From Strength to Strength, years ago. And I think Arthur Brooks talks about this along gender lines, that men tend to make their relationships primarily about the people they're working with. But then when they stop working, they find they don't actually have relationships of safety and trust, because they haven't taken time to invest in that.
Yeah.
Whereas women, generally speaking, tend to keep investing in peer, life-giving relationships all along the way. So I wonder, Sharon, I mean, we're speculating here, right? But I wonder if part of what we're discovering is like, if these male pastors are feeling a sense of loneliness, they don't have the kinds of mutual reciprocal friendships outside the church or outside of work. So their spouse or their wife kind of becomes their all in all, which is great, but could be maybe not so good. I mean, what do you think, Rich? Does that land with you?
Well, it does. First of all, David said, now I'm rethinking my whole thing about my food that I just made, because the more mature you grow, like the less you think about. So I must say that I'm very immature, because I had a very high praise for myself around my own food there. So that's where my mind initially went with all that there. Beyond that, I don't know. And I think this is what I've discovered personally. I mean, Glenn and I and two other friends have been part of a group that's met for the last 8 years, or once a month. And prior to that, I would regard Rosie, as my best friend, and today as well. And at the same time, I recognized there were unique pressures and experiences that I had, that even though she could listen and be, enter into that world with me, there was just certain things that I needed additional support beyond that. And so, I think that both things can be true. It can be your best friend and at the same time experience a form of loneliness from a vocational leadership perspective, because sometimes you need someone who understands to some degree what it's like to be and live in your shoes. And so when I reached out to Glenn and others to say, hey, it wasn't because we weren't close. It was just, I realized I need, to Glenn's kind of thing, the constellation of relationships in order to navigate the complexity of leadership and just life. So that's where my mind goes in terms of, that statistic and the invitation to pursue others who can join us on the journey.
Yeah, it's so good. I think I think one of the other things that I saw so much in my dad's ministry was he created a lot of what he called pastors and covenant groups, where their peer friendships that were people he didn't work for, didn't report to. They weren't paid to laugh at your jokes. You weren't on stages, and this sort of interesting power dynamic of the communicator, or the kind of, sort of minor celebrity within the city. I remember growing up, and my dad would be recognized all throughout the city in restaurants and stores and things. And, just people just saying the weirdest things to us. We'd be out in Target, and they'd be like, why are you wearing shorts? And it's like, we're living in Phoenix, Arizona. It's like, what are you talking about? And so, just all those strange moments where, I feel like I grew up with a celebrity as my dad. And then he, I think, did a good job of trying to create a lot of peer relationships, had a professional therapist and other people in his life, but then really focused on, for himself and for many others, this idea of horizontal relationships with other peers in ministry.
You raised the power dynamics thing. I mean, we've talked about this on this show, but like in ministry or for any leader, your relationships are asymmetrical in terms of power differential, and they're often non-reciprocal. You're not receiving as much as you're giving, and that's not a flaw. That's just sort of what you have to accept as basic to the people who are in your relational network of the church. And we've talked about that. Like we work really hard at this, Holly and I, in terms of like, we're in a table group, a small group with 3 other couples, and have been in that same small group since we got to Rock Harbor. And there is, on the one hand, like similar kind of stage of life. There we go. I guess in our own way, we're in a homogenous group, but the strength of that. So again, there's a downside to the homogenous group. The upside of it is there's a safety to it. So it's our best shot at closing the gap in terms of the power differential, asymmetry, and relational reciprocity. But these are the challenges we're naming for pastors. Like, you got to have different types of relationships and for different purposes.
Yeah, I think that's right. I'd love to hear you guys weigh in on this question of the homogeneity of pastors and the idea. I mean, here I hadn't thought about it till just now, but sort of three of you are married, the host of this podcast. That's great. But this question of singles in ministry, especially people who are on stages or who are trying to lead across a lot of things. I know a lot of our listeners will be people who are single. How are you guys grappling with that? How do you think about that in both your family life as well as in your ministry? So Sharon, maybe start with you.
Yeah, we have grappled with that in a number of different ways. I mean, the fact that I am a pastor means that we are adding just a level of diversity in terms of the perspectives that are being heard on stage. Just to give you guys one example of that, early on in the life of our church, I preached a sermon on the topic of body image. And a number of people came up to me afterwards and said, I have never heard this topic addressed on a Sunday morning before. And I think even though men struggle with body image as well, but it is more, in our faces as women. And so there's going to be, when you have a diversity of voices, and we also we bring in guest speakers, we try to have different people in different life stages that we invite to preach as well. But in addition to that, we also, every Thursday, we run through the sermon with a group of people in our church. And we try to have that group represent a number of different life stages in our church. And we've also recently, I've asked our student pastor to attend as well, to make sure our messages are not going over the heads of our students as well. We really want to make sure there's something that they can grab onto. But that makes sure that we're using illustrations, that we're not forgetting about perspectives, life experiences, that sort of a thing. So those are a number of ways that we have tried to navigate that.
Along those lines, something very practical for pastors to hold on to, especially from a communication perspective, is I use the framework of generational and situational application whenever I'm preaching. And so whenever I am getting to a point where I just don't want to live in the realm of theology and theory, I want to just make sure that this particular message is going to resonate with real life circumstance. I usually go to just generational. What are the generational challenges from one generation to the next that this message needs to speak into? And then what are the situational challenges, whether married or single, otherwise? And I have, in some respects, just a general list. And then what pastoring does is it helps you to tease that out, greater nuance. So it's not just generic kind of situations you're talking about, but there's faces and names and circumstances that are now animating your preaching. And so generational and situational frameworks in preaching help you from just having one-dimensional kind of sermons that are not reaching kind of the span of who's in the congregation.
Yeah, that's it, man. I mean, we have our sermon circle similar to you, Sharon, but on Tuesday mornings, and we invite a number of different staff members in there. There is a woman who's divorced, had a really difficult marriage early on, single mother for most of her life. There are folks who are single. There are folks married with young kids, folks who are married whose kids are just about gone out of the home. And I think that cross-section helps in terms of the sermon prep and all of that. I think, Rich, what you name as situational is something I'm trying to grow in as a preacher too, because it's not all about the sermon, but you do get to talk for 30 minutes on a Sunday. So the way that you talk helps people feel like this is my kind of church, or it's not my kind of church. So that's important. And so the stories that you tell and the scenarios that you paint, so those two things. And I used to only lean on storytelling. Well, the problem with storytelling is I'm pulling from my life, and not everybody's like has experiences that relate to my life. So we've had to work with some of our young preachers to go, too many kids stories, and they're cute, but you're hitting the limit there, and then so for me, the other tool you can play is, instead of storytelling, do scenario painting. And what you said, Rich, is right on. The more I sit with people, the easier it's become. Like now, it's a little over 3 years in Orange County. I have an imagination for, okay, if you're a business owner, if you're, and I can paint scenarios that come actually from our people. And so that's got to be a piece of this.
I think Glenn, I think that's a really important angle, especially for pastors as your church grows. And if you lose proximity to the people that you're actually preaching to, having those avenues for pastoral care, regardless of the size of your church, I would think there needs to be some mechanism in place for you to be tied to the actual stories of what is happening in your church. So to shape, as you said, your imagination for what is actually happening and how does this text speak to people's lived experiences right now.
I want to pause our conversation for a moment and say a special thank you to our partners at World Vision. World Vision has spent decades empowering the most vulnerable children around the world. Now, in partnership with Daniel Strickland, 10 by 10, and our friends here at Barna, they've created a free resource to equip parents, pastors, and leaders as you guide the spiritual lives of the kids and teens in your care. Parenting the Open Generation offers 9 practical principles to help you navigate the real challenges today's teens are facing and to support their faith formation in meaningful, grounded ways. Download Parenting the Open Generation at worldvision.org/resilient26. And again, that's worldvision.org/resilient26. We've also linked it to today's show notes. Okay, back to our conversation.
Yeah. Well, and I think one of the ways to consider doing that we've seen some churches do is they really practice the art of the little mini interview of a lay person.
Mm-hmm. That's good.
Asking them to just talk about how Jesus has changed their life, talk about the specific issues that might be pertinent to the sermon, but also just helping people to get to know what else is happening. I know at the church I attend in Fort Worth, they do this great summer series where they have lay people actually teach for about 8 weeks. And the church is small enough that we all kind of know each other, but don't know each other well enough to know everyone. It's also big enough that it can have enough of a pool of people to speak. But some people are really great communicators. Some are pretty average, but also they do a great job because you really get to hear their stories. And everyone is so patient with it too. It turns out it doesn't have to be a world-class communicator to have the gospel truth being told. And but they also do some little mini interviews with people, and I've just seen other churches do that where and I think there's something really powerful about this for several reasons. One, the Revelation says we overcome by the blood of the Lamb and the word of our testimony. So there's spiritual. My friend, the late Craig Springer, said there's spiritual power in stories. So that's number one. Number two, our research is showing that younger people, especially, have a bit of skepticism towards professional ministry because they're like, well, you're kind of paid to you're paid to believe this. You're paid to be good at speaking. You're paid to move me emotionally. And so when we bring lay people up who even stumble their way through stories or may not be quite as on point, maybe you don't give them the microphone. There's some classic things we can do to make sure we keep control of the room. But people pay attention at a deeper level than we can probably possibly imagine as we hear people's stories and give voice to those testimonies. So that's something we've been seeing. I don't know. What have you guys been experimenting with that?
You know what that makes me think of? Yeah, we have not done that with live, like microphone stuff or lay preaching, but in the form of video storytelling. Although there was one funny one where we were about to interview someone to do a baptism testimony because they got baptized last Easter, and our creative director went to do like a pre-screen phone call interview, and hey, would you like to share your story? We know you got baptized last year. And the person goes, yeah, no, I love it. I believe in Jesus. And, I have this magic candle that talks to me at night, And so we were like, we might need to do a bit more spiritual formation before we put them on a camera. But it made me think about social media. Like, how are you guys using social media to highlight people as well, whether that's stories on social media or even pictures, what we convey as far as who's in the church? Do you have any thoughts on that, Rich?
I think that's something we've been thinking about doing recently. Just to go back for 1 second in terms of the testimonies, for Thanksgiving, we've done it periodically, and then last year, and then again, we have a specific kind of Thanksgiving testimony service where I get up, I give a 10-minute talk, and then for the next 25 minutes, it's just open sharing. And so for us, it's like 500, 600 people in a service. But we use a chime, David, and everyone else, so that once their 90 seconds are up, they get a very gentle monastic chime. Don't let me chime twice though, because the value is everyone gets to share, as many people gets to share. But this is what I would say. When we've created an environment like that for just people to share what God is doing in their lives and how their lives are being changed, it is so powerful. And throughout the course of the year, we've done that in smaller ways. But there's something really powerful about just the community in a very ordinary way, sharing those stories, whether in person, on social media. It's just a very powerful thing to do.
So good. I love that. I love it's like the walk-off music at the Oscars.
Yeah,
yeah. Or if you're from New York, the Apollo Theater where the Sandman comes on and sweeps you off the stage with the broom. So anyway,
wow.
David, you also mentioned the whole thing about pastors lacking external guidance. There's something there in the research of pastors not getting the mentors and the counselors, and it's very easy for us to preach it, but us not to follow through on that. Anything noteworthy for you around that data, or just implications for pastors, or what should pastors who are listening right now be considering with this particular statistic?
Yeah, I'll run through the numbers real fast just to set the stage. So we asked people, if you don't mind sharing, do you currently use the services of any of the following? Personal mentor was at 22%, spiritual advisor was 17%, therapist at 12%, professional mentor at 11%, professional counselor at 9%, life coach at 4%, marriage counselor at 3%, prefer not to answer at 2%, and then 52% said none of the above. 52%.
Wow.
Now, we didn't give any time like in the last year, like ever. There's probably some more data that could be collected, that was set up as a list from which people could pick. So it's possible if you say, do you ever use a marriage counselor? The answer would be higher than 2%, for example. But I think it just tells us that, number one, let's acknowledge where there are some strengths. These are men and women who have gone through a lot in life, and they're probably doing better than we acknowledge. And it may or may not be true that they always need to have a therapist or counselor or all the rest. So let's first assume the best about it. But I think it also reflects that, we're not using these resources to the degree that I think we should. After my wife got sick in 2017, I found this amazing spiritual director. And since then, 8 years on, that's been just a regular rhythm. I texted him today. We're meeting in the morning tomorrow. It's like I'm overdue. I'm overdue for a brush up with my dear friend Dwayne. And so the heart work that I think we can gain, and this notion like, hey, I got it, I'm good. Like that really doesn't work very, very well. I've learned for me. Maybe that's true for you too. But I think this just tells us that there is so much work, and coming out of COVID and looking at all these different places, ministry in general, pastoral ministry in particular, all these accumulated hurts of leadership, of the things that people say, in Hebrews it says, take care that there's not a bitter root that springs up, that defiles many. So I know that as something I have to work at so much in my life and leadership. And I imagine that was true of other leaders. I can only speak to my own experience, but there's just good work that we have to do at a regular basis, even beyond what we think we probably do need to do. But this research just shows us how much pastors are at least acknowledging that seems to be true for them as well.
Do you guys think that there's a stigma in different parts of the country still around this stuff? When I was in Colorado Springs, I think there was much more of a pastor seeing a counselor. What's wrong with you? And maybe even the particular kind of church context, a little more on the charismatic side. California, that everybody's seeing a therapist, so your therapist is seeing a therapist, so it's not a big deal. But what do you guys? What's your experience where you guys are?
in New York, part of it is because I've been in so many different and been exposed to so many different denominational traditions and such. I've had lots of conversations with pastors around this. And Dave, it doesn't seem like we're getting into like the motivation or the why there's resistance behind it.
Mm-hmm.
But anecdotally, I think there's probably 3 or 4 reasons why there's resistance across the board. One, I think, is just pace of life. Like we're doing so much that we can't even imagine slowing down to actually do this. That's number one. 2, I think there's just limited theological kind of reflection on this here. And so we have these verses about I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. And verses like that just become like the actual driving motivation of my life, that all I need is just me and Jesus.
Yeah.
But I think, Glenn, to your point, across the board, and so the stigma, the shame that for me to find someone to help me along these lines means that something is fundamentally wrong with me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that stigma is what really drives the resistance. And then, and Sharon, I'm curious what you think about this, or any of these or beyond. But I do think, if the average church size is 80 folks in the congregation as well, I do think these things are not inexpensive. And so I think there might be financial barriers as well when folks think about finding someone and the level of consistency. So there's those financial limitations. Sharon, what do you think about that or anything else?
Yeah, I do think there is a stigma in certain parts of the country. There isn't necessarily one in this area, I would say, but I think it is hard as a leader, as a pastor. When I go, there is not a room that I walk into and think I'm not a leader here. Like that is a hat I wear everywhere I go.
Yeah.
And so it is hard to put yourself in a position of humility and receiving and being open to somebody might have a better view on my life than I do. I think it's really hard to take that hat off. The other thing I do think too, Rich, you mentioned pace of life. I think that is real as well. Like I am someone who I have a spiritual director, and every time I see on my calendar, it is time to go see my spiritual director, I think,
does your spiritual director listen to this podcast?
She is. Well, the thing is, like, she is amazing. And whenever I leave, I'm so glad that I went. And it always yields these rich insights from the Holy Spirit. And I really need that time. But when I have so much on my calendar that I need to do, and then I see this solid hour in my day where I'm going to stop and I'm going to sit in silence and listen to the Lord, honestly, it's like I'm taking my medicine essentially. Like that is my posture where I know I'm doing it because I need to do it. But the part of me that wants to get things done is very resistant. Same with marriage counseling. Like honestly, any time where I have to go into a situation like that, it feels like I could be more efficient with my time than this. And so I suspect other people feel that resistance as well.
I have a question for Rich real fast. As a New York Mets fan, how much therapy do you need?
David, have you been paying attention to the Mets here? I mean, the Mets, we've had a few bad seasons in the early 2000s and such, but we're coming along here, man. Come on.
Yeah, but how about the Jets? I mean, you got a lot of things.
If you said the Jets, that's different. I've used a lot of money just talking about the Jets in therapy for sure.
Professional services.
I have a thought about something you said, David, that could be so if trying to sum up what we've said, there's the perception of like, I'm the leader, I can't have problems. There's a stigma. There is personal finances. There is pace. I think there's a fourth P here, and that's this problem-oriented approach. And David, you said
Won't
this.
he do it? Won't he do it?
Yeah, you got to have.
Give me the words again, Glenn, please. I want to write this down and say the Lord gave this to me in the sermon.
Perception, personal finance, pace, and then a problem-oriented approach. You said this, David. You said so many pastors, they don't have anything major. But you also alluded, both of you, David, and you, Sharon, talked about spiritual direction. And I think this is something pastors really need. It's not as well known. It's funny because if you swim in these streams, you think everybody knows what that is. But actually, we've all traveled, talked with other pastors, a lot of pastors who don't know what that is. And so if your option is, I've got a mentor, retired pastor that I call sometimes, or I've got a counselor when I have an addiction problem or a marriage problem. Yeah, you're not. There's a whole lot of life in between, you know. Yeah. And for me, I saw a spiritual director for almost 10 years, and I'm hungry for one again. I need to find one now that we've moved to California. And I think what people need to understand is a spiritual director is someone who will listen to God with you and pay attention with you to your life. And it's neither a personal trainer, you know, like a life coach, nor is it a doctor. It's much more like a soul friend and someone who is that safe, trusted place, but is not looking to come to your house for, you know, barbecue on Friday night or you know, Puerto Rican rice and chicken, you know. And I think it can be encouraging for pastors to think about the role of a spiritual director in your life, because you don't have to wait for problems. And David, you said this, you said it's death by 1,000 cuts, or it's these small little wounds that accumulate over time. And as people in ministry, we always say, no, you know what? I'm okay. Until one day we're not. And it's that approach of like, it's slow and slow and slow. And then suddenly you're not okay. Yeah. And the spiritual director will help you pay attention to those small cuts.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think just to be clear, just for the sake of the record here, I think a lot of us as leaders, and then we can see the testimony and the research about pastors, we find a place of equilibrium in our lives, because that's what being a human is. And it's better to find a place of equilibrium than maybe to spin out. But also it's important for us to pay attention to those places when we do spin out, and why. And actually, this is a couple notes I want to make first. One thing broadly we see is that churches don't do a good job of helping people stay in those places of disequilibrium long enough to really let the good work happen. So the God of all comfort comes to comfort us. Out of the comfort we receive, we are able to comfort others, 2 Corinthians. So I do think that as leaders, we need to allow the people in our care to experience the discomfort that God is asking them, the disequilibrium that life is throwing at them, and God is asking them to respond faithfully to. And as leaders, the same thing is true of us. And I do think that spiritual direction is an especially good place for that kind of the equilibrium of our lives to be kindly but gently prodded, and like, oh, it looks like you think you have it all together. You perceive that things are going well enough. You know, you tell us you're fine, but it actually turns out there's probably not as much that's going as well as you think. So you get to a place of a disequilibrium more naturally and say, okay, Lord, why is my soul so downcast? Said the Psalm. So the spiritual direction, double click on that, underline it with you, Glenn. It's been a critical part of my life and soul, and being a father and a single dad and a widower and all those things the last number of years. And it's been along with counseling and therapy and professional coaching and other things, it's been a very important part of my soul care this last number of years.
Well, as we wrap up here, really well said, David. As we wrap up here, I think about the challenge that pastors have to be the feeling of omnicompetence, where I have to be competent in every area of my life. And that's a weight that no one should be carrying. One of my sermons that I preached once, a new lifer got off and said, you know, in AA meetings, there's an acronym for shame. And the acronym is still haven't already mastered everything. And the shame that we live when we have not mastered everything. I think pastors know that feeling very well. Like if we haven't mastered everything, there's something wrong with us. But no, there's not anything wrong with us. We're human beings in need of the grace of God and community. David, so glad to have you with us. DK, as we call him in the streets. DK, thanks for the wonderful research and the analysis you've offered. You have served many pastors and leaders today. So great to have you with us again.
Oh, so great to be with you guys. Love you guys. Thanks again for being part of the Resilient Pastor Podcast on behalf of Barna.
Well, thanks everyone for joining us for this podcast. If this podcast encouraged you and this conversation encouraged you, share it with a fellow pastor or leader. You can find more Barna research and resources, including the Relationships of Today Pastor's Journal at barna.com. And as a thank you for listening, you can use code RPExclusive20, RPExclusive20 for 20% off the journal. And again, thank you to one of our partners, World Vision. Together in partnership with Daniel Strickland, 10x10, and the Barna team, they've created a free resource to help equip parents, pastors, and leaders as you guide the spiritual lives of the kids and teens in your care. Download Parenting the Open Generation at worldvision.org/resilient26. Thanks for watching and listening to the Resilient Pastor Podcast. See you next time, everyone.